Good afternoon, everyone. I apologize. I know that you're probably engaged in very good conversations, but we have a lot to cover in the next hour, so I want to make sure that we use our time to talk about planning your future is the topic. That's an ambitious agenda for 1 hour. But welcome back. I hope you are enjoying your visit. How many of you have attended sessions and classes that are informing the way you think about HDS? Great. Good. So I'm Loida Feliz. I'm the Director of Admissions here at HDS, and I met a lot of you earlier today, but I just want to introduce myself again in case I haven't met everyone. And our next session of the day is going to be talking about admissions and financial aid. And I am here with some of my colleagues, both from admissions and financial aid. And I wanted to start just by introducing some of them. I think you met everyone in admissions earlier today. I'm here with my colleague Beth Flaherty, who is the Director of Financial Aid at HDS, and Julie Field, who is the Financial Aid Officer at HDS. These two ladies, our students will tell you it's important to know who they are. They have answers to a lot of questions that you may have, so I wanted to start by introducing them. And as you can see from our agenda, straightforward. Let's talk about admissions, financial aid, and then we'll open it up for questions for you. And I'll get started, and then my part of this hour is I chose three things to talk to you about when it comes to applying to HDS. One is our approach to reviewing applications and the process of admissions. The second is just to give you the nuts and bolts of the application process for you as an applicant, what you need to know in terms of what you need to submit to us. And then just point out to some additional resources that you may or may not be aware of, and just so you understand that you're not alone in this process. Okay? So how about we start with admissions approach? At HDS, admissions committees seek to build a class with a range of interests, experience, and preparation. And that is because our applicants have a variety of career aspirations. Those aspirations vary widely. And therefore, preparation for HDS cannot be just a particular formula. And that's what you're going to hear me say today. Everyone in our applicant pool is unique, and we take a very comprehensive review of your application because of that. There isn't a single formula that I'm going to give you in the next few minutes about being successful in this process. Successful applicants come from different academic preparations, professional experience, and background in all sense of the word. So cultural backgrounds, academic interests, professional. So because of that, we are very careful in the way we process applications. The admissions committee is composed of faculty members and as well as admissions and other student services staff. And we are not going through the applications and looking at a GPA and deciding somebody cannot be considered any further, or we're not looking at a GRE and deciding we're done with this application. We're going to read every single part of the application before we make a decision. So, because we're looking to compose this cohort of people that are going to work together and in this environment that you've heard so much about today and how unique it is. So that's our approach. So now, let me tell you about the application basis. In front of you, you have the deadlines, very important. We do admissions, we read applications once a year. One single opportunity every 12 months to be considered for admission to HDS. And the dates are coming up for next year. I know some of you are here visiting and you're planning to apply 2 years from now, perhaps 3 years from now. How many of you are interested in applying for this coming year? Let me see. Okay, so most of you. How many are here 2 years down the road, maybe, exploring? Good. That's usually the case. How many of you are interested in the doctoral program? A couple. How many are interested in applying to the Masters of Divinity and Masters of Theological Studies? Okay, and how about, is anyone interested in the special student option that we have? Okay, all right, so I was just trying to make this. Okay, since I mentioned that, why not talk about it for a minute? Okay, so the special student program is an opportunity to enroll in classes at HDS. Our classes are not open to everyone, so you have to either be a degree candidate at HDS or other Harvard schools, or at a school that is part of the Boston Theological Institute to take classes here. So if you do not meet one of those criteria, then you can apply to enroll as a special student to take courses. There's an admissions process for that, but it doesn't lead to any degree program.
So the second question to that is that's the first thing to take the GRE admission exam to take.
We're going to answer questions later, so and I'll mention the requirements for each program as I go through the process. So for the deadlines, what I wanted to point out is that how important they are. Okay, deadlines are not a suggestion. They're not just an idea for you to think about them as such. They are firm. For the Doctor of Theology, for this year is Monday, December 16th at 5 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. For the Masters of Divinity, Masters of Theological Studies, for the Masters of Theology, and the Special Student Program is Wednesday, January 15th at 5 o'clock again, Eastern Standard Time. And all the components of your applications, we expect you to submit them by then. Decisions will be available right around March 15th. So we say mid-March because we want to make sure that you know that it could be a day earlier or later, but around the 15th of March. So again, the most important thing to remember about this part is that our deadlines are important and not a suggestion. And they're posted on our website if you forget. Okay, so application basics. Here's a list of what we expect you to submit to us to be considered for admission. So, and all of these components of the application can be submitted online and should be submitted online. We have an application form that is available now. So if you have, how many of you have had a chance to take a look at the application online yet? Okay, good. If you haven't done so, it is available. One of the most important pieces that I recommend about the application is to read the instructions carefully. A lot of what I'm going to say right now is there available to you 24/7. So you can read the instructions and they will help you. When you read those instructions, think about us. We're the ones that are writing those things, and we're doing it to help you in this process. Okay, it's not just a machine creating words. It's one of us. That's something that Jen usually says, and I like to repeat. Yeah, it's us. So we have an application form. We have academic transcripts. Regarding academic transcripts, we need to see your entire academic history, everything you've done since high school, basically, not just the institutions where you received a degree. We want to see your academic performance over time in any field that you've studied. So we're going to ask you to upload your transcripts, copies of your transcript with your application. If you are admitted and then you choose to enroll at HDS, we're going to ask you to submit the official record. But for the application, all you have to do is find copies that you may have at home or request a copy from your registrar's office, the school that you attended, and submit copies with your application. One of the things that we've noticed in processing applications with transcripts that are not official is that sometimes electronic copies don't have the applicant's name on every page. Pay attention to that. We want to make sure that your transcript is your own, okay? But all decisions will be made contingent upon us receiving those official records later. But do get copies and upload them to your application. There's an application fee of $75, but if you're experiencing an economic hardship, we have waivers for applicants who are not able to pay the fee, and there's a form online with the application that you can use to petition for that, if that is the case. We ask that you submit a resume or a CV for those that have a longer career. The resume, there's no limit. If there's 2 or 3 pages, this is where you can elaborate on your experiences, whether they are professional, volunteer, you presented at conferences, written an article, or anything that you want the committee to know about you in terms of your experience that you don't find another place to put on your application. The resume is where you want to do that. The statement of purpose is an essay that is very important to us, but it's only 1,000 words. And so you want to spend some time writing this document. We don't have interviews as part of the process of being admitted to HDS. So think of the statement of purpose as your opportunity to really speak to the committee who's going to be reading your application. There are 3 things that we expect to read on the statement of purpose for the most part. And again, you can read more about this in the instructions, but I'll tell you a little bit. Your background is important to us. Your objective, and a little bit about your fit. Why do you think HDS is a good place for you and for your aspirations? So for the background, I usually recommend don't get too personal, although sometimes a personal experience is relevant for what you want to study here, but it's not a biography, and you only have 1,000 words. So the background is what you think is relevant in preparation for engaging in the kind of study that you're applying to for admissions for. So tell us about you, who you are, and what you bring. The objective, how is the MDiv, MTS going to help you reach that particular objectives? For some of you who are very, who think about programs as professional preparation for a particular type of role you want to play, chaplain or minister in a traditional form, those are going to be very, very specific objectives. For others, it's a little bit more open, but we want to see some direction, and we want to see how our program fits in with those objectives. And then the fit, as you heard us, the students speak earlier, HDS is a very unique place, so I encourage you to spend some time on the website, reading the bios of our faculty members, reading about our community a little bit more, ask questions while you're here today, and send us your questions via email. We have also a dedicated line to ask students questions about their experience here. There are a lot of resources to help you understand whether or not there's a good fit here for you. And we want to see a little bit of that on your essay, because we want to make sure you're going to be successful here and that you understand the kind of environment that you will be joining should you decide to enroll later if you're admitted. So we want you to do that ahead of time. I think HDS is a great place, but it's not for everyone. You may find that you find better resources for your interests elsewhere. So we want you to start doing that thinking now. So So that's about the statement of purpose. And think of it as a writing sample. This is a document where we're going to be reading this as an essay. So you want to make sure that you write an essay for HDS. If you're applying for multiple schools, as many of you will, make sure you're writing an essay for every school. And I've seen the essay that says, yes, and I really want to go to Yale. It's like, well, I'm not at Yale right now. So the MDiv and MTS applicants are also asked to submit an additional essay. It's 500 words, and you're going to have 2 questions on the applications, and you're going to choose one of those to answer. And we also see that as another writing sample, and also just to get your thinking about a couple of topics that are of interest to our community. So choose one of those 2 questions, it doesn't matter which one. For the doctoral applicants, we also ask for an abstract of courses and a writing sample separate from this statement of purpose. And that one is 10 pages long for the doctoral program. It's a writing sample. It's something that you may already have, you've written before, and you add it to the application. We ask for 3 letters of recommendation. The letters we are often asked who is the best recommender, and in our case, we want at least 2 of those references from faculty members, people who know you as a student, who can speak to your to your experience in the classroom and what are you going to contribute. A professor will have a specific way of writing about you based on how they experience you as a student in the classroom. They don't have to be professor in religion courses, but in the humanities in particular, those are very, very helpful to us. And these are professors that hopefully you've had more than just a classroom experience with them or classroom relationship. Hopefully you're choosing people who know you well and who know also what your goals are. So take some time to talk to the faculty members you're approaching to ask for letters of recommendation, because they will write a better letter if they know why you have chosen to apply to our program and to this particular school, and if they know a little bit more. The 3rd letter could be from a professional experience, someone who supervised your work in some capacity. It could also be from a volunteer experience. For MDiv applicants, the 3rd letter, we ask for what we call a ministerial letter. And because ministry is so widely defined at HDS, it's really someone that can speak to your potential for the ministry that you are that you want to pursue and later. So when I say ministry, I don't mean parish ministry. It really is in the context of your own application. Now, we also ask all applicants to our degree programs to submit scores from the General Gre Test. Some people are great at taking standardized tests, and that's good for you. That is not true of everyone. We here do not use the GRE scores to determine who gets considered for admissions and who doesn't. We take a very comprehensive review, so our admitted applicants have a wide range of scores. My recommendation is that you prepare for the test like if you are going to run a marathon. You don't just go run a marathon, you practice for that, right? So you want to prepare and take the test, do the best you can. We primarily focus on the verbal and the writing for those of you that are concerned about your math skills, and that would be me too. So those are the 2 that are more important to us. But again, it's just one piece of data in your application. For us, every part is very, very important. And for those of you who already have a master's degree and who are applying to the master's programs here, you can choose to waive the requirement. It's completely up to you. If you already have a master's degree, you feel like you've already shown that you perform well at the graduate level, you can choose to waive that right on the application. For the doctoral program, that's not an option. You do have to take the GRE whether or not you have a master's, and a master's is required for the THD. And there isn't a GRE requirement for the special student program. So that's the answer to your question. And all of these components of the applications must arrive by the deadline. I cannot address that enough. We normally, after you submit the application, the day after, we are going to start processing all of those materials, and you can just sit back and relax at home. I know that's too much to ask, right? You're probably going to be anxiously waiting for the results. But if you submit everything online by the deadline, we'll do our work and we'll get back to you in the middle of March. So that is the process. And now, just highlight resources quickly. We have open office hours this afternoon from 4 to 5 if you have any questions, individual questions that you don't get to ask here. Our website is a great resource, and email us. All these beautiful people I introduced you to earlier are waiting for your emails to respond to your questions, but a lot of them are answered right on the website. So, and again, when you read the website, think of us. We are writing that. We also have an Ask the Student program. So there's an email dedicated to ask students questions, and connect with us with all the social media. We're always sending great information about what's happening in our community, and that also tends to inform your application in the sense that you get to know us and what happens here, even though you're not on our campus on a day-to-day basis. So these are all resources for you. We also have an amazing blog that our students are writing to tell you about their experience, and that is also found on the admissions pages. So that's my part, and now I know Beth has a lot to cover too, so thank you.
Okay, thank you, Loida. We'll have an opportunity to ask questions about both admissions and financial aid at the end of the session. And I do want to say that I will try, there's a lot of information to cover. I'm going to try to get it through thoroughly and quickly, but also give you opportunities to ask questions. If you have questions, particularly about financial aid that are very specific to your situation, we would recommend that you come and see either myself or Julie. Will be both over at our offices in Divinity Hall, having open office hours from 4 to 5. We're happy to answer individual questions that way. If you just have general questions, again, we'll get to some of those in the question and answer. So again, welcome. I'm sure you've been welcomed to death, but I'm the one that really means it. So I hope that, I'm kidding. Everyone really is quite happy to have you here, and we've been preparing for you. And hopefully we'll be able to answer a lot of questions that you're going to have about the process of applying for financial aid. So we're going to talk briefly about applying for financial aid, how we determine a student's eligibility, the cost of attendance, what the cost of attendance is, why you want to know what the cost of attendance is, the types of financial aid that are available. We'll talk a little bit about what a sample financial aid package might look like. We'll talk about funding the unmet need or what's not covered by the financial aid package. Talk about applying for private scholarships, which we are very pro about, and we recommend the students do that. And we'll talk a little bit about how we treat those if you do receive them. And then what I hope will be a couple of helpful tips, just not about just applying for financial aid here at HDS, but applying for financial aid in general, and then hopefully we'll have some time for questions as well. So applying for financial aid, I'm going to start by addressing how we award our doctoral students. And our doctoral students are not required to apply for financial aid. So essentially, if you get into the doctoral program, you're going to get the set package, and all students typically receive the same package. The only caveat to that is if a student has a prior doctorate, we don't necessarily guarantee the same funding. But if you do get into the doctoral program, our current doctoral funding is that you receive full tuition and fees for years 1 through 5, and you get a stipend for years 1 and 2. So that's a living stipend. The stipend amount for the 13-14 school year is $25,260, and it's split over 10 months. And again, we haven't determined what the stipend for 14-15 will be, but this is just to give you a ballpark. And THG students also receive 4 years of summer stipend support, usually in the $5,000 range, to help with if you're going to go abroad to study for the summer, or there are things that you need, language classes or things like that, that's available to you as well. In years 3 and 4, the students do not receive the living stipends, but they are eligible for 2 guaranteed teaching sections per semester, and between the teaching earnings and a top-off stipend that we provide, students will receive equivalent approximately to what their first year stipend was. After the 5th year in the program, institutional grant aid is not available, but sometimes teaching assistantships might be. You're not guaranteed the teaching assistantships at that point, but certainly in some cases they are available. We also provide students with a Dean's Dissertation Fellowship year that allows students to concentrate on finishing their dissertation. The fellowship amount for 13-14 is $25,000 for the academic year. THCs are generally not eligible for federal aid in the first couple of years, and that would include things like loans and work study because the package is so generous. After year 3, when students are not receiving the living stipend, oftentimes students could apply for federal aid. At that point, you would need to submit a Fafsa if you're a U.S. citizen or permanent resident. And so that's essentially what the doctoral process is. So now we're going to move on and talk a little bit about the process for the MTS and MDiv, and we're going to start first with domestic students. So we offer both merit-based and need-based institutional grant support. We, as of last year, we separated the two. We used to have one program that you had to have the need-based eligibility in order to qualify for the merit. And what we decided to do was split the 2 programs. So we have a small, fairly small merit-based program. Approximately 20% of the incoming class will be offered a merit award. The other pool, the large pool that we draw from, is the need-based institutional grant support. And we recommend highly that you apply for the need-based aid, even if you're hoping to get the merit-based consideration. You would either receive the merit component or the need-based component. You would not receive a combination of the both. Merit decisions are made by the admissions committee. They do not require a financial aid application, but we strongly recommend that every student apply for the need-based anyway, because in the event that you don't get considered for the merit, and again, it's a very small pool for the merit, you want to know that you're already in the running to be considered for the need-based. If you wait until you get accepted, and I cannot tell you how many students did this last year, we had a number of students who called up and said, I didn't actually think you would accept me, so I didn't apply for financial aid, but now I want to apply for financial aid. And at that point, it can often be too late. We were able to take a wait list last year, but we had an enormous amount of students that didn't find out if they were going to get any grant assistance until, in some cases, after they had to accept their spot in the class. We don't recommend that. That will panic you. Don't do that. So apply for both. Even if you think, I'm not necessarily sure I would qualify for the need-based, apply anyway. Because you never know what's going to happen. I think it's always a good idea just to be prepared. And we also recommend highly that you pay attention to deadlines. Like Lloyd has said, we cannot stress it enough. It's not a suggestion, it's a way of life. It's really important because we do have a limited pool of funding, and we do want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to apply for this. So not only just here at HDS, but know your deadlines at every school you're contemplating applying to. Know the policies, know the deadlines, know if there's 2 separate applications, know what's expected of you, and meet those deadlines. Because if you don't, you're going to find yourself in a situation where either you're going to have to try to get on a wait list for funding, or you might not be able to receive funding at all. So it's really important that you're on top of what you need to do and when you need to do it by. So for our students applying for the merit-based, we don't require an application. If you get the merit component, it's based on the strength of your application, and that's a decision that the admissions committee makes. The need-based, you would have to apply for the Fafsa, which is your free application for federal student aid. I'm sure many of you are aware of that, familiar with it, love it, hate it, but know what you're supposed to do with it. If you've never done a Fafsa, you don't know what a Fafsa is, please come and talk to Julie and I. We're happy to go into more details about it. But that allows us, in conjunction with the institutional application for financial aid, to determine your eligibility for need-based funding. The deadline for both the Fafsa and the HDS institutional application are February 3rd, 2014. That's a hard deadline, so please make sure that you're on top of that. In order to fill out the Fafsa, you have to be a U.S. citizen or an eligible non-citizen. And if a student is in default of a previous Title IV student loan, you would be ineligible to receive both federal and institutional aid. If you are currently in default of a loan and you're working on getting that rectified, please have a conversation with Julie and I about how we would go about proceeding with that situation. Continuing on, the Fafsa, again, can't be filled out until at least January 1st of 2014, and you should use estimates of your 2013 taxes if you have not completed them by then. If you know you're going to do your taxes in the middle of January or the very end of February, the end of January, we would recommend that you wait to fill out the Fafsa until you do that, but make sure that you meet the February 3rd deadline. Don't assume that you shouldn't fill it out because you haven't done your taxes. Just use your best estimates from your W-2s, and then you'll go back and update the information once you finally finalize your taxes. If you're applying to HDS, you want to make sure that you choose our school code, which is E00210. This is also on our website, so if you can't remember it, you'll be able to find that information. If you use the generic Harvard University code, your FAFSA will never make its way to us, so you just want to make sure that you're choosing Harvard Divinity School specifically. The HDS institutional application will be available in mid to late December. Students will receive an email from the financial aid office after they've submitted their application for admissions. So you have to submit your admissions application first, and then after the application is ready in mid-December, we're going to send you an email within a few days telling you how to log on to our institutional application, and it's an online form. It's fairly simple. It should take you probably no more than 10 to 15 minutes to fill out. And it's always a good idea to keep copies of your taxes, your W-2s, and your year-end investment statements in case we have questions for you later on. We don't request those forms up front, but there is a process, a random process by the Department of Education called verification, where a student may be asked to provide those documents. So you want to know where they are and how to get your hands on them if we do ask you to provide them. If you're an international master's student, you do not have to fill out, you're not eligible to fill out the FAFSA, but you're certainly eligible for the institutional grant support, and you would fill out the HDS institutional application, which I just described, and again, the deadline for that is February 3rd, 2014. Is anyone applying to the THM program? Okay, so the THM program is the one master's program that we do not fund with grant support. If a student is a U.S. citizen or an eligible non-citizen, they're welcome to apply for federal aid, but we don't provide grant assistance for that particular program. Okay, we're going to move on a little bit to talking about determining eligibility. So as I mentioned before, most of our institutional aid, and when I talk about institutional aid, I'm talking about grant aid, which does not have to be repaid. And we base most of that on demonstrated financial need. So we look at your cost of attendance, so the cost of attendance for an academic year, and we'll talk a little bit more about specifically what that's made up of. But our cost of attendance for this year is $49,140. And I subtracted out, I made up a random EFC of $12,500. EFC stands for your estimated family contribution, and that's what you're going to get off of your FAFSA information. So you put all your information on, and then it spits out this number that says your EFC is, in this case, $12,500. So we subtract that from your cost of attendance, and that tells us what your estimated need is. And need is sort of a tricky question because your need could be high, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we have the funds to meet everyone's cost of attendance. And something that we think is really important here at HDS is we really view your education as a partnership. It's a partnership between the financial aid office here, and you. We're going to work to help get you some grants. We're going to help work with you to figure out your loan eligibility, look at private scholarships. We'll help you with filling out any forms, but we also expect you to participate in this because you are the primary beneficiary of your own education. And so we don't want you to expect that you're going to have to come up with everything on your own, but you are going to have to look for outside scholarships in many cases, talk about what your loan eligibility might be, and certainly making sure that you're on time for deadlines, because that will put you in the best possible position. So our need-based grants for those who demonstrate eligibility can range from half tuition to full tuition. So we have 3 tiers of need-based grants. We offer half tuition, so that's half of the full-time tuition. We offer 3/4 tuition, so 75%, and we offer full tuition. For students that receive the merit-based components, those grants would include a full tuition grant and a modest stipend to help with living expenses. Stipends range generally in the $8,000 to $10,000 range. And like I said, a smaller pool of students, about 20% of the incoming class, will be offered those merit-based awards. When we talk about merit, the issue here is that the large majority of students could qualify for the merit-based. We just don't have enough funding to go around for everyone. So we really don't want you to focus on the fact that if you get a need-based scholarship instead of a merit, that somehow that means that you're not wanted here, that you're not an excellent candidate, that you're not a great student. It doesn't mean that at all. Here, it's not really a question of who can qualify, because most students are really well academically prepared. It's just a limitation of funding. So certainly don't feel like there's somehow something wrong with you or we don't want you here. We certainly want you here. If you've been admitted to this program, then we obviously feel that you're a good, viable candidate that can bring a lot to our campus. So keep that in mind, because I know it's hard when sometimes you see the numbers and it's not necessarily what you were hoping for. But again, we do have funding available, and we think that compared to a lot of other schools, we definitely have generous packages. And as I mentioned before, I think I probably mentioned this 3 or 4 times already, don't just count on the merit-based, make sure that you're applying for the need-based as well. So we're going to move on to how much does it cost to attend to HDS. So we are relegated by the Department of Education. We're required to come up with an estimated cost of attendance for an academic year. In our case, we're a 9-month academic program, so we go from September to May, and we have to come up with a cost for what it will cost for tuition, for health fees, for a student activity fee, and then an estimate of your food, housing, books, miscellaneous. So you see that this is a pretty straightforward. There's not a whole lot of places that we can work with here. So we have to stick, for the most part, we have a little bit of wiggle room in some areas, but for the most part, we have to stick to these specific categories. So we know for sure what we'll charge for tuition and health insurance fees. These are, of course, the 13, 14 rates. The 14, 15 rates have not been established yet, but this just gives you a ballpark. And again, we post all of this information on our website as well, so that you have a sense of what the costs are. The Blue Cross Blue Shield is the individual policy. Many students are actually able to waive that if they have their own personal plan or they're covered under a family plan. If you waive that cost, then we just deduct that from your cost of attendance. If you don't have your own insurance plan, then you're required to take the school's plan. The UHS fee is a University Health Services fee, so that's if you get sick on campus, you can go to our Health Services office and someone can see you. That is not waivable. You do have to take that fee. The activities fee is $50 for the academic year. All of that money goes directly to our student activity groups, so that funds all the programmatic things that happen throughout the academic year. And then we have estimates for what we think it will cost you for food, housing, books, and miscellaneous expenses. And these are estimates, but we think that they're pretty realistic. In the housing, I will particularly like to point out that our housing budget is assuming about $1,100 a month for both utilities and rent. And most of the time, that means that you really should be thinking about getting a roommate, if at all possible. I recognize that that's not always the right situation for everybody, and certainly you have to make the best decision for you. But I often say to students, if you live like a graduate student when you're a graduate student, you won't have to live like one when you're 50. So, you know, the next roommate I want is a husband, so I certainly understand that, you know, at my age, I don't necessarily want to have a roommate. But on the other hand, living with someone else for a couple of years to really keep your costs to a minimum will certainly help you in the long run. The other thing that we should talk about is it's not inexpensive to live in this part of the country. In some cases, you can rent a palace for $600. In other parts of the country, here you might get a closet, and I can't even guarantee the closet would have a door. So you just have to be realistic about what your expenses are. But I think what's really great is you have time to think about this. So start talking to other students, students that are currently living here. Where do you live? How did you find a great housing deal? Pay attention to those things. Look on boston.com to get an idea of what the rents might be in the area, and don't necessarily convince yourself that you have to live in Cambridge proper. We're just a couple of blocks away from Somerville. You'd be surprised at how much less expensive Somerville is, and it's still very accessible. There's a number of other communities that you can look at as well. So keep your options open. If you have decided that you're going to live in Cambridge in a 1 or 2 bedroom by yourself, you should be prepared that you're going to pay $1,600, $1,700 for rent. And our budget will not allow you to borrow that much. So you're going to have to think about, do you have other resources that will help you cover that? Because we can't allow a student to go beyond their cost of attendance. We do have wiggle room for things like if you are bringing a family and you have dependent children that you need daycare for while you are in school and your spouse, if you have one, is working, we can work with you to increase your cost of attendance, but that just gives you additional borrowing eligibility. It doesn't increase your grant. I want to get to some questions, so I'm going to move through a little bit more quickly here. In addition to the Harvard University grant aid that we have, we are also participating in the direct federal Stafford loan program. Unfortunately, as of a few years ago, there are no longer subsidized direct Stafford loans for students. All of the direct Stafford loans for graduate students are unsubsidized, which means that the interest is accruing on the loan while you're in school and during your grace period. The loans right now have reverted. They used to be capped at 6.8%, but they have reverted to a variable interest rate. The interest rate for this academic year is 5.41%, so they actually went down. We have no idea what they'll be next year, but we'll certainly alert students. Usually in June is when we get a sense of what the interest rates for the next year will be. In addition, with the Stafford loans, students can borrow a maximum of $20,500 for the academic year, assuming you have room under your cost of attendance. We also have a small amount of Perkins Loans. Perkins Loans is the only subsidized loan that we have for graduate students. We limit them in most cases to between, most cases $6,000, but we can go up to $8,000. And typically when we're awarding those, we're looking at the students that have the most financial need, and then also students that have significant undergraduate debt as well. And those loans are 5%. We also participate in the federal work-study program. For those of you that are thinking about going into the MDiv program and have heard a lot about these great field education opportunities, most of those are paid through work-study. So it's a great opportunity for students that aren't necessarily interested in doing a field ed. If you're in an MTS program, you certainly can do a field ed, but if you are interested in working at any of the libraries or some of the different institutes, if you have work-study eligibility, you certainly can work anywhere throughout the university. We do have a limit of how much students can earn because we only have a certain pot of funding to go around. For this academic year, we limited it at $4,000 for the academic year, but it's a great opportunity to, in many cases, to work in something that you're really passionate about and earn some money. And in some cases, students just say, I want to check out books in the library and I don't want to think about anything related to my studies, and that's great too. And we encourage work study because it helps you reduce your loan debt. It gives you money, pocket money for expenses and things. And in many cases, it will give you valuable work experience. I started off in a work study office, and now I have this amazing career as a director of financial aid, so you never know what's going to happen. Quickly, This is just an idea of what our a financial aid package might look like. What we do here at HDS is, in terms of grant, we're going to give you the best grant package we have available. We don't negotiate. We don't believe in throwing something out and then having you come back and say, well, how about this, how about that? We feel like it's really important to give you your best offer up front so you know exactly where you stand and so you can compare it to your other offers. So we'll tell you exactly what the grant eligibility is, and there really isn't any room for negotiation there. We'll also give you any of the Perkins loan eligibility if you qualified for it, and then we give everyone a base loan of $8,500 if you're a U.S. citizen or eligible non-citizen. As I mentioned, students can borrow up to $20,500. We prefer not to package all of your loan eligibility up front because we do not want to encourage you to overborrow. We would like you to think carefully about what your financial plans are, get your housing figured out, and then come back and say, okay, I need additional funds. And what happens is, over the summer, if you've accepted your spot, we send out lots of information about how you can request those additional loans. We also don't pre-package work study because we really want to give the work study to the students that really intend to use it. So students request work study when they get to campus, usually in mid to late August. And again, we have lots of opportunity to talk to students about how you would go about requesting that and how you would determine if you're eligible. But I just wouldn't want you to be concerned if you didn't see it on your initial award letter and think, oh, I must not have work study eligibility. It's just a matter of us not pre-packaging it. So, in the estimate that I gave you, if our cost of attendance is $49,140 and your initial award is $33,628, then there's a gap to fill of about $15,512. And again, I'm just throwing an estimate. Everybody's package is going to be somewhat different. But it's a really great opportunity to start thinking about how are you going to cover the difference. Will you get a work study job? Will you look for work outside of work study? Do you have your own savings to contribute? Are you looking to borrow additional loans? One of the loans I didn't mention that we do participate in is a Graduate Plus loan. So that allows you to borrow up to your cost of attendance minus any institutional grant support and any federal loan eligibility and work study eligibility. But we do counsel students fairly carefully about that because we really are concerned about the level of debt that students are going into. It's not our job to talk you into borrowing or out of borrowing, but it is our job to make sure that you have the best information available so that you can make the best decision for you. So Julie and I are always available by phone. We can have phone appointments with students where we do loan calculators. Students are welcome to come into the office if they're in the area. We really want to be seen as a resource, as somebody that can really help you through this process. But pre-planning, thinking about how are you going to do this is really important. If you have not looked for private scholarships, I recommend highly that you do that now. It's never too early to begin, and a lot of applications will have very early January deadlines, so you want to be on the lookout for that. If you're going into, if you're an MDiv student particularly focused on ministry, you might want to look at the Fund for Theological Education. They have some of their own fellowships, but in addition to that, they often have, they have a private scholarship search engine. I can't recall off the top of my head what it's called, but you can look on there, and it will tell you all sorts of, the Fund Finder, that's it. So you can type in some basic demographic information about yourself, and it will pop up some scholarships you might be eligible for. Also, we highly recommend that you look at your alma maters, any social organizations that you're affiliated with, any family members that might be in the Kiwanis or Knights of Columbus or whatever organization, find out about opportunities that way. At HDS, we, any outside scholarships that you receive, we put first towards your to take care of your remaining unmet need. If we have to reduce any funds, we reduce first loans, then work study. The last thing we would ever try to touch is your institutional grant because we don't want to penalize you for having taken the initiative to get some outside funding. And that's an important question to ask other schools. What happens if I get an outside scholarship? In many cases, if you get funding from outside of the school, they may do a dollar-for-dollar swap. In other cases, they'll treat it exactly like we do. So you just will want to find out about that. The reason why we would potentially have to reduce an institutional grant is if it was going to bring you over your cost of attendance, because we can't allow a student to go over that. The next screen is just, we do have a small outside funding opportunity webpage. It's just a very small smattering of what might be out there. We post whatever we're aware of, but sometimes it gives you a good idea as a starting point. And just finally, a couple of things that I hope will be helpful to you. Again, know the financial aid deadlines and policies of every school you're applying to. Make a folder, have a folder, make a list, and keep to it because it's so important. Start making a financial plan of how you're going to play for graduate school, because while many schools, including HDS, have generous packages to offer you, it's not free. So you do have to have a plan for how you're going to fund it. Also begin researching the areas that you might want to be planning to live in, so you have a sense of the rent, utilities, etc. If you have personal debt, I think now is a great opportunity to try to pay down those credit cards, car insurance. If you have a car, you may want to rethink whether or not it makes sense to bring it here, because in many cases you may not be able to get parking with an apartment that you rent, so you'd have to park off-street. And in the winter, that's a problem when you have snow emergencies and you have to find a place to move your car, and to rent a spot in a garage in the winter can be pretty expensive. So keep that in mind. If you've never done a budget before, this is a great opportunity to start. Because this is really essential in being able to keep costs manageable while you're in graduate school. Again, myself and Julie will both be having office hours from 4 to 5 over in Divinity Hall. We're up on the second floor. We're in the suite with admissions. So if you had admissions and financial aid questions, you could tag team us and we'd be able to get your questions answered. We also are available by email, so feel free to email us as well. And we have about 5 minutes left, so we can take a couple of quick questions. Yes?
I just have a very small question. How are people notified that they are either accepted or not accepted? Is it via a letter in the mail, or how does that work?
So the question was, how are students notified whether they've been accepted or not been accepted?
We do everything online these days, so you will get an email that tells you to check your decision online in the same account that you used to apply.
And in terms of financial aid, usually within 1 to 2 business days of your admission email going out, you'll also, if you've met the deadline for financial aid, you'll also get an email from the financial aid office as to how you will log back on to view your financial aid award letter. Yes?
How long does it usually take for you to receive RTOs? So how far ahead should we do the test?
So the question was, how far in advance you should take the GRE so that we can get the scores on time. I recommend taking the GRE no later than December 15th if you're applying for January 15th. So about 4 weeks or so. These days sometimes we get them very quickly after that because it's an online report that we get. But sometimes things fall apart, especially around the holidays when everybody's trying to take the test. If you're applying to the doctoral program, that means you need to be taking the GRE right about now. And they're valid for 5 years. So if you've taken the GRE in the last 5 years, they should still be valid. ETS can send a report to us.
Right over here in the back.
Yeah, I'm 25. Will I still need to submit my mother's tax information?
That's a great question. The question was, do you have to, as a 25-year-old graduate student, do you have to submit your parents' information? And the good news is no. As a graduate student here, at least at the Divinity School, you are automatically considered independent, so we do not look at your parents' taxes. On the flip side, if your parents have a loss or a reduction in their income, we aren't able to take that into consideration because we never factored that in to begin with.
Hi. Is there a wait list involved in the admissions process, or is it straight up and down? Yes, no?
We don't have a wait list generally, for the most part, for the master's programs. At the doctoral program, that is often the case that we do have a wait list. We haven't had one in about 5 years in the master's program.
We probably have time for one last question. Yes?
Is there anyone that can be interested in? If I'm the only one, MTH interested, I don't have to say this aloud. Should I say this aloud?
The THM.
The
THM.
THM?
Yeah.
Sure, you can raise your question.
All right. All right. My question is, I was watching your presentation here, but there's not much information about the THM as to the essay requirement.
As to the GRE requirement?
Essay.
I'm sorry,
Essay requirement.
the essay requirement.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, there isn't an essay required for the THM. It's just a statement of purpose.
Okay. Regarding waiver for the GRE.
Yes, there is a waiver if you have a master's degree, and most THM applicants will have a master's degree.
And how?
You can waive the requirement on your application.
In a piece of paper or
It's,
orally?
it's a question on the application.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
That's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for your attention. And again, if you have questions, please come back and see us.
Thank you, everyone.